One thing that's still the same for Season 7 is that ultimates are still the end-all be-all of winning in Overwatch, with most of them being unbelievably powerful and fight-turning. Let's take a look at the ultimate ability tier list for Season 7 to see who's got the best Q that will win your teamfights in a flash. Make sure to use the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are loads of guides covering strong heroes with even stronger ultimates, and even ultimate guides to help you build your ultimate and use it more efficiently, either saving your team or pushing them in, or just plain getting picks on your own with it. Check it out and enjoy the video. In F tier, the worst ultimate has got to be Cassidy's Deadeye. The High Noon just really hasn't ever been good, and only really so when paired with Reinhardt, Lucio, and sometimes Symmetra. It's a lot of steps to make an ultimate good, especially when it can almost all be kited and then mitigated by a Matrix ability, or even a Genji Deflect or a Mei Ice Wall. There's so many ways to beat it that it just has to be the worst ultimate on here. There's not much to say, but at least he has some damage reduction in the ultimate, so he isn't just a death magnet. But it's pretty hard to push him far up enough to get kills, but also avoid getting stunned, and too far back out of stun range, and you get kited around corners and walls. It's a hard ultimate to get value out of, so it can also be used as a reload in a pinch, but it might still be worth it to go for quick one-shots after swinging wide around a corner. Up in D tier is a similar hit scan ultimate with Soldier 76's Tactical Visor. It's got similar issues, being easily kited and not able to do much even at close range, and the fact remains that most mitigating abilities from tanks handle it super easily, and not just Matrix abilities either. Just a shield can tank most of the Visor's initial pressure, and then everyone will have fallen back already. In order for just a shooting type ultimate, where you're buffed up to shoot even harder, to be a good ultimate, it's got to have more burst potential and mobility, and Soldier just doesn't have that as much as he needs to. Next up in D tier is Widowmaker's Infrasight, which is definitely a good ultimate but difficult to rate because it can also be kited super easily. Her sights aren't the best option in many situations, and is really only good if both teams have Widowmaker to counter the other one. Most of the time it's easy to hang back and play slow and even go aggressively out of nowhere to catch the wall hacking team off guard. It can definitely help Widowmaker to get picks herself quite often, so it's not the worst ever, but it's not good at all for countering other big ultimates on the scene, and in fact it usually gets completely ignored. Next up we have C tier. There's actually a lot of ultimates here that are pretty good individually, but lack consistency to really go nuts. First off is Roadhog's Whole Hog, which is a good ultimate for Roadhog, but not a good ultimate for a tank. Tanks really could use way better of an ultimate than just a knockback and high damage potential, but the updates to what he can do during it make him a lot more viable at beating heroes like Sigma, baiting out the grasp, and then hooking him in for more damage. It's definitely not ideal for killing squishy targets, but it's better than nothing for sure. Next up is Mei's Blizzard, which should be way better than Whole Hog, but unfortunately the game has really creeped past Blizzard as a viable way to get picks off of frozen targets. Whoever you freeze will just be life gripped, Suzu'd, ammo fielded, even nano boosted sometimes. It's really difficult to isolate picks, and even when you can, they'll just get saved. And on top of the fact that just normal mobility and speed is enough to just leave the effective range and then easily come back to help, makes it that much harder to focus people down in it. After that is Hanzo's Dragon Strike, and even though it doesn't seem like a C tier ultimate with how well it flows into Hanzo's kit, it's still a zoning tool 99% of the time. You can sometimes get a few rare picks out of it, but you need perfect placement right next to an unsuspecting backline. Most heroes have a way to quickly dodge it, especially when they know where it's coming from with the sound cue, but it's still a great ultimate to keep tempo up and to disrupt backline when the fight starts. Next up is another damaging ultimate with Reaper's Death Blossom, and while it's got good damage potential, it's just like the other hit scan ultimates, simply too beatable and blockable by any normal tank mitigation. It can also be stunned, and because it's best used at close range, good luck dodging Orisa Javelins and Sigma Rocks. It's still quite good to brawl with, pushing a massive AoE of damage forward and can get some crisp multi-kills, but it's definitely not the premier ultimate for hitting picks all the time with no preparation. The second Dragon ultimate is just barely better, with Genji's Dragon Blade still holding onto relevancy despite all the cringe it has to go through to get value. The Dragon Blade is a good ability for sure, but it needs perfect execution or perfect discipline to get picks or space. Using Blade during your team's brawl phase when your tank is pushing in with cooldowns and your supports are ready to heal frontline, it's one of the best ultimates to surge forward with tempo. But outside of that, it's almost a bait to dying, since after you deflect you have to decide to either keep committing or falling backwards, and you can't hesitate without getting punished. It's a sad place for such a cool ultimate, but at this tier and above, teamwork can still get you great results, and even solid consistent multi-kills against lower ranked players and against weaker heroes as well. Finally, onto the second tank ultimate, still in C tier, is Wrecking Ball's Minefield. Right now, it's not the best for getting picks or even zoning too much, since a lot of heroes can clear enough mines to be able to contest the objective. But really, it's once again a situational ultimate, except it only works in situations where you're playing against people who don't have a good matchup into it. Immobile supports at a DPS, and a tank incapable of dealing cleave damage to clear mines is what you need, and only then will it get consistent value. It's still one of the better ultimates because it can be consistently built and activated, leading to constant pressure, which can definitely make a difference. Tank ultimates are really strong, and the next one is no slouch either. At the top of C tier is D.Va's Self-Destruct, although not entirely for the fact that it can do so much damage. Just having a second life with how powerful D.Va's mech is makes the ultimate crazy powerful. Not only do you have the chance to go for the Pokebomb setup if you want, but every time you get knocked out of mech, you have a crazy zoning area to get back into it, no problem. It's not easy to catch the pilot D.Va, especially when she has supports with her, so if you use it correctly, you'll be able to achieve the best D.Va gameplay. High limbs and extremely low deaths, staying in the fight forever even if your first mech dies. Next up for B tier is Valkyrie, Mercy's super healing tool. and it's the first support ultimate here and definitely the worst out of all of them. It just goes to show how strong support ults normally are because Valkyrie is quite good and still down here. It helps Mercy herself go for her own neutral of finding a res, and it damage boosts and heals the whole team instead of just one target, allowing her to help massively in a dive engage as well as peel one. It's an underrated tool that's difficult to play around, but as a support ultimate, it's still not explosive enough, since just like other weaker ultimates, it can just be waited out most of the time. It isn't usually enough to counter some big heavy hitter ultimates at the top of the tier list. Next up is Riptire, one of the most dangerous ultimates even to tanks. Even though its maneuverability and speed are both really high, it's still killable, and at this point in the game, it's really easy to look up at the sky to hear and see the Riptire coming, since it's usually coming over buildings, and to kill it before it lands. Rarely is a tire really going super hidden without a Junkrat bug being used, so even though it can hit really hard, it rarely does, especially in a poke meta where anyone can melt its 100 HP down solo. And with 5 of those members on a team, forget about even dealing any damage to the tire at all, even the shields. Next up is Orisa's Terror Surge, and it's definitely a medium level ultimate on a high tier hero, and even though it's in the best state it's been, rarely does the average player get consistent picks with it. Besides running for the Ana every fight, the Terror Surge struggles to catch anybody else, since everyone either has damage mitigation or mobility at this point to escape the Terror Surge range. It's still a good ultimate for its forced relocation, pulling people in. And even if you can't solo kill everyone caught, simply pulling heroes together is good for combining with other ultimates for guaranteed fight wins, which is actually really good for snowballing matches. Ashe's Bob is next, who's only going through a temporary slump. As a fast charging explosive ultimate with 2 immediate effects for multiple situations, he's a great option to handle any composition. But with so many people able to headshot him, his staying power is greatly reduced this season, meaning the best value you get out of him is comboing something with his uppercut, but it's always a bit unreliable to hit more than just a tank, who can also boop and stun the Bob if they're ready for it. Halfway through B tier, we have Junker Queen's Rampage, which is another situational tank ultimate. It's one of the most feast or famine ultimates out there since it has insane double sustainability, damage, and anti-heal value at its best. But at its worst, it gets all cleansed and you get isolated in the backline, or even at medium best, it just gets cancelled or booped or shielded off. It's a good ultimate that just gets blocked by quite a lot of abilities. Doomfist rounds out the top 3 of B tier with his Meteor Strike, which is just a handy ultimate without too much crazy stuff. If the damage was increased slightly, it would be a planet-killing haymaker of an ultimate. But for now, it's just reliable to extend your engage and add on 100 or so damage to get closer to bursting people down. Hitting the center of the ultimate does take skill, but often you don't have a choice in your opponent's mobility or mitigation to be able to easily deal with your area of effect. And just shy of the top of B tier is Sombra with her newly neutered EMP. It's a bit crazy how far EMP has fallen from its peak to where it is now, and while it can still get picks, the damage is so pathetically low and the charge rate so slow that it's a total drag going for more than one solo kill with each. It feels like you should be able to get more for how long it charges, but it's a bit of an illusion. It is such a strong ultimate that they've nerfed the charge rate, but it only ever really was good for one pick against the current climate of supports, being way too strong and having a lot of options to deal with it. So keep focusing on one pick or comboing with your allies to keep getting wins with it. And at the top of B tier is Ramatra's Annihilation. It seems like all these poor B tier ultimates are just easy to peel off, but with a high chance of success if it does get the value it wants to get. Annihilation is harder to counter with less Orisa being must-picked every game, and it's got another double value of being able to boost up your engage, refreshing your armor and doing even more damage in your area, staying in your nemesis form for way longer, having your block too. And when your ultimate ends, you'll have all the cooldowns you need, your shield, and your new nemesis form. So it fits well into this playstyle. It's a good fit, but it definitely is very counterable in a lot of situations. Finally, onto A tier, chock full of the top tank and support ultimates, although some familiar DPS ultimates shine through, starting with Echo's Duplicate. The Duplicate just has to be A tier, being able to not only use the other team's ultimates, but also basic abilities. Spawning an Ana with an anti-heal in your backline is a pretty crazy way to start a fight, or even using stick keys and laser, and then suddenly there's a Genji with all cooldowns as well in your backline. Her tank copies have gone a lot worse, which is why she's lower in the tier list, but it's also pretty difficult to build support ultimates in time as well, especially with the ult charge rate and your duplicate nerfed in favor of getting the ultimate more often. So the best ultimates are nerfed, but you still have flexibility. It's definitely a top level ultimate that has high highs and low lows. Next up is Torbjorn's Molten Core. It's definitely not the ultimate you see popping off all the time, but the amount of damage it does, especially to armor, makes it insane for zoning out points, and in overtime it becomes a nightmare to deal with, especially on payload maps. It's definitely an ultimate that strength is up to the player, so make sure to be decisive with your lava shots to make it crazy hard for your enemies to contest the objective without melting into goo. The first tank ultimate in A tier goes to Graviton Surge, and is a classic that has been doing much better recently. Zarya comes and goes, and so does her Grav, but luckily for her, almost every successful Grav is a free fight win right now. Maybe counterable, but not that much more than other ultimates. Building it may definitely be up to the player, but when the ult is online, it's got great success against a lot of different compositions. Rally is next, still a pretty recent change to Briggs' arsenal. The big value it brings is mostly a new stun in the game, and overhealth. And while it's not a lot, it's definitely hard to match it in the front line. A stun is one of the best things in the game, so having a new one is pretty crazy. A team pushing with Rally has a lot of options just from the one stun to immediately counter what you put in front of them. Trying to flux the guys attacking? Stunned. Try to use an amplification matrix? They stun you through your shields and walk right through you. Anti-heals can't stop Briggs' allies, even though it affects her quite a bit. But being the only way to deal with anti-healing, it's definitely got another plus in the book. It's almost impossible to escape in Kite with the sustained pressure, which is a key attribute to have for the top of the top when it comes to ultimates. Next up is another lukewarm support ultimate in Coalescence, but it's definitely got way more value than it should for building so often. Brutally playing to build your own Coalescence will unlock a whole new shield piercing part of your kit that is one of the best special abilities in Overwatch, right next to anti-healing and damage reduction. Fast building, can heal and damage and help focus people down. It's the ideal opening ultimate, and an opening ultimate is good, but it's not a guaranteed fight win despite being perfect for starting off the fight right. Reinhardt takes another spot in A tier, with his Earth Shatter being surprisingly good right now. It's similar to Graviton Surge in that if it lands, it will lead to a pretty convincing team wipe, but even against solo heroes, it's good to get that one pick to keep yourself in the fight. The best way to see it is that Shatter is only easy to block for other Ryans and Orisa. Everyone else will always have a weak spot to exploit and force out, which makes it almost confirmed to get a hit, and then charge them into your team if the enemy team has enough peel to save them. Another tank ultimate that's slightly better is Winston's Primal Rage. Primal has one of the highest skill ceilings in the game, and so it is true that you can definitely fumble it and get nothing done. But not only will it almost always completely occupy the entire enemy backline, with a massive 1000 HP Winston going crazy, in a lot of situations you can easily get a pick for free by just juggling someone into your team. Otherwise, you can easily handle a very split fight, with people all over the place, moving from target to target with your long range and fast jumps. The only weakness Winston has is just hard, pure damage, but his mobility is as bolstered as his hitbox size in the ultimate, meaning you'll only really die if you get too greedy. He's definitely really good at building the ultimate too, so every time it's available, the backline is always in danger. Finally, another DPS ultimate goes to Pharah in the upper A tier, and even if it can be shielded or matrixed, it has the craziest raw burst damage in the game, meaning it's way harder to counter reactively. Having a high damage quick burst ultimate like this for a normally slow hero like Pharah is a great switch of pace, and the raw effectiveness of the ultimate really explains why everyone playing against Pharah is always looking for the skies and anticipating it. It's also gotten better over time, ending earlier meaning the Pharah will almost always survive, especially if you got an initial pick with your missile burst, meaning one less person to try to pick you out of the sky. Next up is Transcendence, just your clean super healing support ultimate. Anti-heal is the only thing that deals with it, and even though 2 heroes can apply it, that's just 2 out of 38. It's just a top level A tier ultimate, also for the fact that Zenyatta himself becomes completely invincible, helping to stall and to play aggressive for flanks, having a backup to save yourself and join up with your team. It's a flexible ultimate, and definitely can't be slept on despite Zenyatta not being too good lately. Symmetra takes the next spot with her Photon Barrier, which is a similarly clean super shielding DPS ultimate. You'll almost never be able to break the barrier entirely, since the Sims team will always be able to focus your team while you have to keep shooting a 4000 HP rectangle splitting the map in half. The only counter is EMP, which is really rare and can even get outpaced by Symmetra because of its low charge rate. It's definitely a top 3 DPS ultimate considering how good its utility is for the rest of your team. For less utility and more killing power, Bastion's Artillery Strike is number 2 in A tier. It's best placed here because of how good it fits into Bastion's kit. He's always waiting for the engage, and now he can launch crazy missiles before or even after the initial play. It's not a flashy ultimate, but it puts a lot of strain on the backline and is one of the best ways to safely force cooldowns reliably before the fight starts. And even if it doesn't matter how strong Bastion is without the ultimate, we're talking about only the ultimates here, it's still a good ultimate to lay down pure pressure, stressing out the enemy team into dealing with it no matter what. Tracer is the final DPS for A tier, with her pulse bomb being as reliable as ever. It's only really not S tier because now Cassidy has 75% damage resistance on his roll, and Ramattra and Doomfist can now also block a stuck pulse bomb with their blocking abilities. Her effectiveness is slowly dwindling, but it's an ever-present powerful ultimate that can't be underestimated or underpracticed. The top of the A tier is the insane new ultimate for Miliari, Captive Sun. Its effect is truly unique and that's one of the most aggressive support ultimates, but it's still pretty blockable. Over time though, as players have gotten better at Iliari, it's been way too difficult to eat most of the ultimates, or even block them since Iliari can just fly out to the skybox, but it's definitely below some of the top ultimates for that very reason, being counterable. Now for S tier, the top of the crop, starting with Sojourn's Overclock. Sojourn's Overclock is just the best unaided DPS ultimate out of them all. She has crazy potential and range with it, and for a DPS ultimate to have to be countered by other ultimates is pretty unprecedented, and it definitely demands an answer or can just one-shot anybody no problem. It's the ideal DPS ultimate, being able to turn fights with great skill, and it doesn't require a big committal either to get it started. Next up is the Tree of Life, the least exciting ultimate left in the list. It's just a big tree that is difficult to kill, gives overhealth and burst heals, and is generally annoying to fight against. It's so difficult to fight in that it forces a kite, and that alone makes it super strong, similar to other ultimates that are so good that you literally cannot justify playing into its full duration. Now for the top 5, starting off with luckily a non-support, but with Sigma and Gravitic Flux. For the strongest tank, his ultimate has got to be the strongest too, and it's also got 2 ways to get the kills done, by pulling them up to be killed midair or by slamming them down for half their health. Once again, there are a lot of ways to counter it, but in the compositions where Sigma is good at, not only can he help his team one-shot people midair, making it almost uncounterable, but his flight allows him to get into a great position after the ultimate ends, extending his presence for longer. It's the ideal tank ultimate and can be used on solo and multiple targets alike, but definitely keep an eye out for Lifeweaver's Life Grip to mess you up. Now for the top 4 support ultimates. Firstly, with the one reliable counter to Sigma's Gravitic Flux, Sound Barrier. Sound Barrier is insane, simply buffing everybody to deal with anything they're about to face, both aggressively and defensively. It's one of the best ultimates because it can just turn the fight perfectly around, not being just to stabilize or just to push, but for both. Just don't get it cancelled during charge up and you'll give your team a crazy second wind in almost every situation. The number 3 ultimate has got to go to the Kitsune Rush. It's only better than Sound Barrier because it is truly impossible to kite. It places out a massive boosting area with speed to rival Lucio's Zone and the unique cooldown boosting property that gives your whole team exponentially higher playmaking abilities. It's only limited by the fact that it's so aggressive based, meaning that using it later has a lower chance of bossing up, unlike the second best ultimate on the tier list, Ana's Nano Boost. The Nano Boost has it all. Damage and damage reduction. That's all you need, and its versatility is based on who it's on. It's perfect for saving your teammate and then punishing a dive, for placing kill pressure on backline instantly, and for keeping your tank alive for long enough for them to clutch the fight. It's almost perfect, only matched with the fastest charging and craziest burst potential support ult in the game, Amplification Matrix at number 1. This massive window has been so strong for the entirety of Baptiste's existence, and it's not slowing down. It's so difficult to deal with considering how long the duration is, the raw number of just doubling the damage outright, and for how big the size of the window is, making it difficult to escape from when placed right. It can make or break objectives, and even though there are more explosive crazy ultimates, none are this powerful and this fast charging at the same time. That's it for the tier list of all ultimates in Season 7. Hope you enjoyed and let me know what your suggestions are in the comments. Make sure to use the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are loads of guides covering strong heroes with even stronger ultimates, and even ultimate guides to help you build your ultimate and use it more efficiently, either saving your team or pushing them in, or just plain getting picks on your own with it.